The smell of antiseptic and slow-fading lilies had become the scent of Maya's life. It clung to her clothes, her hair, the very walls of the 4-story Brooklyn brownstone that had been both her home and her gilded cage for 20 years. In the master bedroom, Eleanor Van Horn lay propped on a mountain of pillows, her body frail, but her eyes still sharp, with a lifetime of judgment. Maya adjusted the oxygen tube under her mother-in-law's nose with a practiced hand. "The tea is too bitter," Eleanor murmured, her voice a thin rasp. "It's the same English breakfast you've had for 40 years, Eleanor," Maya said, her tone even, devoid of resentment. She had long ago exhausted her supply of resentment. "I'll add more honey." As she turned to leave, Eleanor's bird-like hand, surprisingly strong, shot out and gripped her wrist. "Maya." The old woman's gaze was intense. "You know, you're the only one. Liam was too weak. Daniel, that boy is a ghost. But you have stayed." Maya didn't reply. She simply waited. "This house," Eleanor wheezed, her eyes drifting towards the large bay window overlooking the garden Maya tended with such love. "It's been in the Van Horn family for 3 generations. Full of history, full of ghosts. It needs a steady hand, a strong heart." Her eyes locked back on Maya. "It will be yours. I've seen to it. You're the only one who has truly been here for me. I've made a promise." And a Van Horn keeps their promises. A flicker of something. Hope, validation, a sense of terrifying finality stirred in Maya's chest. This wasn't the first time Eleanor had said this, but the proximity of death made the words feel heavier. More concrete. "Don't talk like that," Maya said softly, extracting her wrist. "You need to rest." She left the room, the promise hanging in the air like the scent of the lilies. The house. Her house. For 2 decades, she had poured herself into it. She had nursed her sweet, fragile husband, Liam, through his long illness until his death 5 years ago. She had managed the rotating staff of nurses for Eleanor, cooked the bland meals the old woman preferred, handled the finances, and maintained the grand old building, a constant, silent force, while the world outside changed. She had met Liam, fresh out of college, an art history major, dazzled by the charming, poetic son of old New York money. He was a flickering candle, beautiful, warm, but destined to burn out quickly. His family had tolerated her, the middle-class girl from New Jersey, for his sake. After he was gone, their tolerance had solidified into a passive-aggressive reliance. She was useful, she was dependable, she was there, and she had stayed, bound by a mix of grief, loyalty, and that whispered promise. The brownstone was more than a building. It was the museum of her life with Liam, the physical manifestation of all her sacrifice. The idea that it could truly be hers was the single thread of future she allowed herself to cling to. Later that night, as she polished the massive mahogany dining table that seated 12 but had only seen 2 for years, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel, Liam's younger brother. "Hey, Maya. How's the old battle axe holding up?" Maya's lids tightened. Daniel, the prodigal son, who flitted from one tech startup to another in California, who sent extravagant but thoughtless gifts at Christmas, and had visited exactly 3 times in the last 10 years. He was all charming smiles and empty platitudes, the polar opposite of his quiet, thoughtful older brother. "She's stable," Maya typed back. "She asks about you. Tell her I'm swamped changing the world," came the immediate. Glib reply. "You're a saint for dealing with it all. Seriously, what would we do without you?" "I don't know," Maya replied and ended the conversation. The we always felt like a slap. There was no we. There was her, alone in this massive house, and them, out in the world, living. Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 weeks later. The funeral was a small, somber affair. Daniel flew in, looking tanned and out of place in his sleek, black suit. He patted Maya's shoulder awkwardly. "Rough time, huh?" She was a tough old bird, but you were amazing with her, truly. Maya just nodded, her grief a quiet, private thing, intertwined with a terrifying anxiety about what came next. The reading of the will was held in the opulent, book-lined study of the family lawyer, Mr. Sterling. Maya sat stiffly in a leather armchair, her simple black dress feeling shabby against the rich grain of the furniture. Daniel sat across from her, checking his phone under the table. Mr. Sterling, a man whose face seemed permanently set in lines of solemn propriety, cleared his throat and began to read the formal document. It began with small bequests, a pearl necklace to a cousin, a donation to the Metropolitan Museum. Maya's hands were clenched tightly in her lap, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. "And to my daughter-in-law, Maya Vance Van Horn," Mr. Sterling read, his voice echoing in the silent room. "In recognition of her devoted care and companionship, I leave the sum of $100,000, along with the entirety of my personal jewelry collection, excluding the Van Horn family emeralds." Maya's breath hitched. $100,000? The jewelry? It was a generous gift to an outsider, a lavish tip. But it wasn't the house. It wasn't the security. It was a dismissal. Daniel shifted in his seat, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. Mr. Sterling continued, his voice gaining a more momentous tone. "Finally, the remainder of my estate, including the primary residence located at 1243 Willow Street, Brooklyn, New York. All financial instruments, stocks, bonds, and remaining personal property I leave to my beloved son, Daniel Robert Van Horn, to be his absolutely and in perpetuity." The world did not tilt, it did not shatter, it simply deflated. The air left the room. Maya felt as if she were collapsing in on herself, a star becoming a black hole. The promise had been a lie, a convenient fiction to ensure her continued servitude. "Well," Daniel said, breaking the silence. He sounded genuinely surprised, but the surprise was quickly morphing into triumph. "I don't know what to say." Maya said nothing. She couldn't. She was a statue of ice. "Maya," Mr. Sterling said, his voice softer now, almost pitying. "The funds and the jewelry will be transferred to you immediately. Of course, we will need to discuss a reasonable time frame for you to make alternative living arrangements." Daniel had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Hey, Maya, of course. Take your time. No rush at all. This is still your home." It was never my home, she thought. I was just the live-in curator. She stood up, her legs feeling like foreign objects. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice a ghost of itself. She didn't look at Daniel. She couldn't bear to see the victory in his eyes. She walked out of the office, through the gleaming lobby, and out onto the bustling New York street. The sun was shining, people were laughing, and her life had just ended. The following days were a blur of numb activity. Maya moved through the brownstone like a phantom, packing her own belongings. The ones that held no Van Horn legacy, her books, her clothes, the few pieces of art she had bought herself. The $100,000 was a life raft, but it felt like blood money. It wouldn't last long in New York. Not if she wanted to start over without sacrificing every remaining piece of her dignity. Daniel, to his credit, was mostly absent, dealing with the myriad of legal and financial complexities of his new fortune from his hotel suite. He texted her once, "Seriously, take all the time you need. I'm in no hurry." The message felt less like kindness and more like a lord permitting a peasant to remain in the field until the harvest was fully planned. It was on a rainy Tuesday, while packing up the library, that she found it. She was carefully wrapping Liam's first edition poetry collections in tissue paper when a heavy, leather-bound family Bible slipped from a high shelf, its brittle pages splaying open on the Persian rug. With a sigh, she knelt to gather it. It was a beautiful, ancient thing, its cover tooled with gold leaf. As she went to close it, a single, thicker sheet of paper, tucked into the middle of the Old Testament, caught her eye. It was different from the Bible's thin, onion skin pages. It was modern, heavy linen paper. Her heart began to beat a strange, frantic rhythm. She carefully extracted it. It was a will, handwritten. The heading read, "Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Margaret Van Horn." Beneath it, the date. It was from just 6 months ago. Maya's eyes scanned the familiar paper. Spidery handwriting, each word sending a jolt of electricity through her system. "I, Eleanor Margaret Van Horn, being of sound mind and body, hereby revoke all former wills and codicils," she read on, her breath catching in her throat. "To my daughter-in-law, Maya Vance Van Horn, I leave my entire estate, absolutely and in perpetuity. This includes the property at 1243 Willow Street, all financial accounts, investments, and personal possessions. Maya has been my rock, my caretaker, and the only child I have known in my final years. She has earned this right with her love, her sacrifice, and her unwavering strength." Tears she thought had all been cried began to stream down Maya's face, hot and silent. "To my son, Daniel Robert Van Horn, I leave the sum of $1. I do this not out of malice, but out of a belief that he has already chosen his own path and his own fortune, and has had little need or want for the burdens and blessings of this family. May he find his own way as he always has." At the bottom of the page were 2 signatures, Eleanor's, unmistakable, though shakier than in the formal will. And below it, the signature of a witness, Sarah Jennings, and a date and notary stamp. Sarah Jennings. The name was familiar. She was the daytime hospice nurse who had cared for Eleanor before the night shift nurse. Beatrice took over. Sweet, reliable Sarah, who had been abruptly let go by the agency after Eleanor complained she was too chatty. Maya had always suspected the complaint came from Beatrice, who was dour and preferred silence. Maya clutched the paper to her chest, sobbing and laughing at the same time. It was real. The promise was real. This document, heartfelt and specific, was Eleanor's true final wish. The formal will, read by Mr. Sterling, was the old one, the one that reflected the family's traditional expectations. Eleanor had, in a moment of clarity and gratitude, changed her mind. She had chosen Maya. But why was it hidden in a Bible? Why hadn't it been given to Mr. Sterling? The answer came to her with chilling clarity. Beatrice, the stern night nurse. Beatrice had been recommended by Mr. Sterling himself, a family friend. She had always been overly curious about legal and financial matters, often asking Maya pointed questions about the will. Maya had thought it was just nosiness. Now, she wondered if it was something more. Had Beatrice discovered this new will and hidden it, ensuring the old, more appropriate will would be executed? Was she somehow in league with Mr. Sterling, or perhaps even expecting a reward from Daniel for her silence? It didn't matter. What mattered was that Maya had it now. She didn't call Daniel. She didn't call Mr. Sterling. She immediately called a lawyer recommended by a friend from her long-ago art history days. Her name was Anya Sharma, and her website promised aggressive advocacy for the unjustly treated. An hour later, Maya was in Anya's sleek modern office, the handwritten will placed on the desk between them. Anya read it, her dark eyes scanning the document quickly. A slow smile spread across her face. Well, well, she said, looking up at Maya. It seems the old girl had a heart and a backbone after all. This, Maya, is a perfectly valid holographic will. Handwritten, signed, dated, and witnessed. The notary stamp is the cherry on top. It revokes the previous will entirely. What do we do? Maya asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and fury. We, Anya said, leaning forward, her expression turning predatory, are going to war, and we are going to win. The legal petition filed by Anya Sharma was a masterpiece of devastating clarity. It presented the handwritten will, included an affidavit from a handwriting expert confirming it was Eleanor's, and laid out a timeline that made the previous will look like an obsolete relic. It petitioned the court to invalidate the probate of the first will and to execute the terms of the second, later one. The response from Daniel and Mr. Sterling was swift and brutal. They attacked the will as a product of undue influence, claiming Maya had manipulated a frail and confused old woman in her final days. They called Sarah Jennings, the witness, a disgruntled former employee whose testimony was unreliable. The battle lines were drawn. The quiet, dignified brownstone became a ghost in Maya's life as she moved into a small rental apartment. Using the $100,000 to fund her legal fight, the case dragged on for months, a draining process of depositions, evidence submissions, and legal maneuvering. Daniel's true colors emerged fully. The charming casual brother-in-law was gone, replaced by a cold, entitled adversary. In a deposition, he sneered. She was the help, a paid companion. She knew her place, or so we thought. This is a blatant money grab. Mr. Sterling, his professional reputation on the line, fought dirty, questioning Maya's character, implying her relationship with Liam had been a calculated move for his money, even though Liam had never had any of his own. It was Anya who found the key. Through a private investigator, she discovered that Beatrice, the night nurse, had received a $50,000 consulting fee from Daniel's newly opened accounts just 2 weeks after Eleanor's death. When confronted with this in a cross-examination, Beatrice's story unraveled. She admitted to finding the will, being shocked by its contents, and forgetting to file it properly. She claimed she'd planned to give it to Mr. Sterling, but had been busy. The $50,000, she insisted, was a gift for the grateful Daniel for her excellent care of his mother. No one believed her. The judge saw through the charade. The case was turning. Faced with the collapsing credibility of his key witness and the overwhelming validity of the holographic will, Daniel's lawyers approached Anya with a settlement offer. They proposed a split. Maya would get the brownstone, and Daniel would keep the liquid assets, the stocks, bonds, and cash, which amounted to nearly $4 million. Anya presented the offer to Maya in her office. "It's a good deal, Maya," she said frankly. "You get the house free and clear. It's what you wanted from the beginning. You can sell it and be set for life. Or live in it. The fight could still go on for another year, and legal fees are eating you alive." Maya looked out the window at the city skyline. She thought of Eleanor's promise. She thought of Daniel's contemptuous words. She was the help. She thought of 20 years of her life, given freely, then stolen, and now being bartered over. She didn't just want the house. She wanted justice. She wanted the entire rotten edifice of the Van Horn family's presumption to crumble. "No," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't accept." Anya raised an eyebrow. "Maya, be strategic. This is a win." "It's a compromise," Maya corrected. "And I'm done compromising. We see this through to the end. I want the judge's ruling. I want it on record that Eleanor's true will is the valid one. All of it." Anya studied her for a long moment. Then a slow, respectful smile spread across her face. "Okay then. All or nothing." The final court ruling came 3 weeks later. The judge, in a scathing opinion, validated the handwritten will in its entirety. He condemned the egregious behavior of Beatrice and expressed grave concerns about the conduct of Mr. Sterling, referring him to the Bar Association for review. He ruled that the entire estate, the brownstone, and every last dollar of the $4 million in liquid assets now belonged solely to Maya Vance Van Horn. Daniel was present for the ruling. As the judge spoke, his face turned from red to a sickly gray. He looked at Maya, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of bewildered hatred. He had not just lost the money. He had been publicly disinherited by his own mother. And the woman he considered the help had been deemed more deserving. He stood up and walked out of the courtroom without a word. Maya felt no euphoria, only a deep, profound, and weary sense of peace. A brownstone was hers. The money was hers. The victory was absolute. Daniel, humiliated, slunk back to California. The New York Society pages, which had once chronicled the Van Horns' every move, now ran a small, juicy piece about the caretaker's revenge, painting Maya as a modern-day heroine. But as she walked through the silent, empty halls of the house, she felt nothing but the weight of its history. It was a beautiful tomb, a monument to a family that had brought her nothing but pain. The ghosts of Liam, of Eleanor, of Daniel's contempt were in every corner. She couldn't live here. This was not a fresh start. It was a gilded prison. She listlessly began the process of sorting through a century of Van Horn possessions. In Daniel's old room, now a storage space, she found a stack of unopened mail addressed to him. Among the credit card offers and ski magazine subscriptions was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was a wedding invitation. Daniel was getting married to a Silicon Valley heiress. The wedding was in Lake Como, Italy in 3 weeks, a destination wedding for the elite. The invitation was lavish, embossed, a world away from the quiet grief of the brownstone. A cold, clear idea began to form in Maya's mind. It wasn't enough to have won. Daniel still had his life, his freedom, his future. He saw this inheritance as a lost bonus, not a moral judgment. He would bounce back, using his charm and his new wife's money. He would never truly understand what he had done. She needed him to understand. She sat down at the mahogany desk in the study, the same desk where Mr. Sterling had first shattered her world. She opened her laptop and began to research. She spent days on it, reading, learning, making calls. Anya Sharma had facilitated the transfer of the entire $4 million fortune into Maya's control. It sat in an account, a staggering number that felt completely disconnected from her. 3 days before Daniel's lavish wedding in Italy, Maya made a series of phone calls. She spoke to directors, to financial officers, to founders. She was calm, precise, and unwavering. When she was finished, she had donated the entire $4 million. Every last cent. $1 million went to the National Caregivers Alliance to establish a fund for caretakers in need of financial support and mental health resources. $1 million went to a local Brooklyn arts program for underprivileged children, a cause a world away from the Van Horn Stade Museum donations. $1 million went to a hospice foundation in Eleanor's name, with a specific directive for staff training and patient comfort. And the final $1 million was split between a dozen smaller charities supporting women leaving abusive situations. Funding legal aid and housing. She didn't keep a penny of the liquid assets for herself. Then she called a premier real estate agent. "I'd like to sell 1243 Willow Street," she said. "Furnished, as is. I want a quick sale." The agent, knowing the property's value and history, was ecstatic. The sale was finalized in record time for a stunning all-cash offer. The day the papers were signed, Maya sat in her small rental apartment. She was, for the first time since she was 22, completely free. She had the money from the sale of the house, which was substantial enough to last her several lifetimes if she was careful. But more importantly, she had her soul back. She knew the news would reach Daniel eventually. She didn't have to wait long. Her phone rang. An unknown number with an Italian country code. She answered, calm and silent. "What have you done?" Daniel's voice was a screech, unhinged with rage. He was screaming, barely coherent. $4 million. You gave it away to charity? You crazy bitch, that was my money. Maya let him scream. She let him exhaust himself, his voice cracking over the long-distance line. When he finally fell into sputtering, ragged breaths, she spoke, her voice as quiet and steady as it had been in Eleanor's sick room. "It was never your money, Daniel," she said. "It was Eleanor's, and she left it to me, to do with as I saw fit. I saw fit to give it to people who need it, people who provide care, who create beauty, who offer comfort, people who are nothing like you." He was sobbing now, great, heaving sobs of pure, impotent fury. My wedding. Everyone here, they'll know. You've ruined me. No, Daniel, Maya said. A faint, sad smile touching her lips. You were never the main character in this story. You were just the plot device that helped me finally find myself. Have a lovely wedding. She hung up. She blocked the number. Then she picked up a pen and a fresh, clean sketchbook. She hadn't drawn in 20 years. She started with a single, simple line, the beginning of a new creation, in a life that was finally, completely, and utterly her own. The revenge was not in taking, but in giving away, and in doing so, she had reclaimed everything.